My angels, we're back for story time. And I think you might notice some very cool New Year's nails. What? I did those myself, you guys. I bought a little kit, okay? It's very expensive, nails are. Who can keep up with this? Who can keep up with that? Anyways, I have other priorities, so I got a kit and I'm trying to do them myself. And I kind of got carried away last night. I'm not gonna lie, that's ridiculous. I got a hold of glitter. I watched the Ancient Apocalypse series on, if you haven't seen it, Graham Hancock, a British author doing pioneering work in world history, just reforming world history. And I am cheering you on, Graham Hancock, wherever you are, cheering you on. Okay. And interesting segue, because I was thinking last night about how Graham Hancock he's an author and a journalist, and he's researching all of these ancient civilizations, which I believe truly existed as well, and floods and all of this kind of stuff, which I did my dissertation, my final dissertation on the ancient Noah flood. And so much of what archaeology and geology is presenting us with now as some evidence, because we have satellite technology now, is that these floods most likely did exist on a global level, by the way. And do you know what? I'm saying it with a little attitude, because if you go watch this series, anybody who is pushing society's norms, right? The normal paradigms, the collective ideologies that have been handed down to us, the stories like of Genesis, all these things, anybody who pushes just an expansion or a further understanding of that, or a better understanding, a deeper understanding, a more thorough understanding, people who are doing their work, right? I'm just saying, he is like cut from the same, I feel, not to like, I'm not trying to sound arrogant or anything like that. It's just like, you have done all your work and you're presenting ideas, and just the pushback that you get it's bewildering on one level, because in a way we're kind of probably naively thinking people genuinely just want the best information in order to make their own conclusions. But what you find is the spiritual, I'm going to say ideological infrastructures that are embedded within humanity. And it's all based on pride. We don't want to give up that box that we have. That box is safe and comfortable. And so God bless all of the pioneers and prophets and black sheep and people like you, my angel. If you're watching this, you are probably one of those who are doing the good work. Yeah, in all fields of life. There we go. All right. Perfect segue. I wrote down what I wanted to say to you guys today. This episode, if you don't watch another episode in the Who Am I part 2 series, part 2 of the 3-part series of Rebloom, this is the one that I would say to watch, because it's the biggest, I would say, missing key in Christian theology, in just our understanding together as believing people about what happened in the garden, right? Let me just turn my heater on real quick. Otherwise, you're going to start seeing my breath big time. We've been going through Who Am I? So who am I? Imago Dei. That's where we started. Made in the image of God. What does that mean? We've done that. We went into Adam and Eve. What does it mean for Adam to have been created before Eve? What was the dynamic between them going on? We did that one. And then we did the pious question, which is really introducing the serpent into the story. And that was our last episode. This episode, I would call it Sicut Deus. Okay, Sicutdeus, and that's Latin for being like God. Okay, if you truly want to understand yourself, get your notepad or get your ears ready and open your mind and your heart, lay down everything that you have, and listen to what the Hebrew author was telling us happened after Adam and Eve ate the apple, okay? Because Adam and Eve, which Adam just means humanity, right? Adam from Adamah, humanity who came from the ground, from the earth. And then you have, we're going to get to this, Isha, who is woman, who is later called Eve, male and female. This is us. This is who we are. What happened? I'm going to stop talking because I wrote down my notes and I'm going to stick to them today. Right? Okay, let's go. So before I begin today, I want to name why this episode feels so important to me right now. This is part of the Rebloom series, and this episode, Who Am I?, was already planned. But I don't think it's a coincidence that in the last few weeks, I've been seeing more and more content online, interviews, commentaries, clips from Christians that have really stopped me in my tracks. I want to say this carefully because I am not trying to be inflammatory. However, as a believer myself, I have found a lot of what I'm seeing deeply uncomfortable. Not because I think that people are being insincere or because I don't think that they love God or have a true faith, but because there is a tone and a posture and a projection of certainty that feels very arrogant. And it troubles me, not just personally, but theologically. Because I think that what we're seeing, particularly coming out of the West, is Christianity being enacted or legislated from the false God within, without being recognized. I always say to you guys, it's not that we know what we're doing, okay? And I don't believe that we know when we're being that way. But it matters. It really matters. Okay, this is also why, and I want to say this gently, the world so often experiences Christians as self-righteous. Again, I'm not saying that to shame anyone. I'm trying to tell you the truth. The world knows something instinctively that we don't want to admit. Every Christian is also dealing with the false God within. Every Christian who is stepping into the seat as judge is not doing it with God's permission. And every human being on this earth, whether they, regardless of belief, is imago Dei, made in God's image, and knows that. Knows it innately, that nobody else should be judging them. This is not an insult, it's anthropology. It's an unspoken but true epistemological reality of every human being. Do you remember when I told epistemology is how we deal with information, how we deal with knowledge, okay? The reason the world reacts so strongly to Christian arrogance is because on some level they know that they're not exempt from this condition either. This is why this episode, Who Am I?, is so critical for reform. When Paul talks about the old man, and the new man, he isn't speaking abstractly. He's naming this exact reality that Sicut Deus, again, Sicut Deus means to be like God, and the new life in Christ coexist for a time. And I know many Christians would say, yes, of course, I know I have an old man. God is renewing my nature. But knowing that is not the same as understanding what the old man actually is. Because the old man is not just your bad habits and you dragging your past into the present and all your shame and all your, it's not just that. It's not just your ability to be tempted. It's not just immorality that lies within you. And remember, you guys, the reason why I said that, if you go back and watch it, morality is based on in human terms, is based on right and wrong. Adam and Eve were created before they ever ate the tree of knowledge in innocence, right? And so we talked about how innocence has nothing to do with morality. Right and wrong did not exist in their reality. That is just what the author of Genesis has told us, what the Creator through divine revelation has told us. So your old man is not about anything to do with your morality. For some people, that will be a shattering revelation. Too hard, maybe even to accept, but let's keep going. Your old man is the false God self, the self that still believes it is responsible for knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil, right? The self that is still defensive against God. The self that is still prone to domination, not dominion. The self that still legislates good and evil for itself. Okay, if this isn't making sense yet, just stay with me, all right? If I take my new belief system, Christianity, following Christ, right, and I enact that from a place without humility or awareness, without death, then in Bonhoeffer's own words, whose book we're using for this, Creation and Fall, I have become satanic. If I am legislating my Christianity from a place of my false God, then I am, by very definition, the pious question, as scholars say, truly satanic. Not because I reject God, but because I stand in the center in God's name. Taking God's name in vain is not about saying, oh my God. Okay? Taking God's name in vain. Remember, in the ancient world, a name was a purpose, right? A purpose and a meaning. When we stand as God in our judge selves, I'm judging. I am the judge. And we use God's words in our mouth from the pulpit, online, with our friends, against God's word, which is his creation, right? Your brother, your sister, your neighbor is God's word made flesh. When you use his words against his word, them, you are doing exactly what the serpent in the garden did, which is why we call it the satanic question. And this, I think, is why Christianity currently looks so disturbing to so many people. It's not just confusing, it's not just outdated, it is hostile. Truly. There's a sensualism, a discrimination against the world, rather than a love for the world. And I want to say this, be honest with yourself. If you are a Christian, be honest with yourself. Have you or have you not been taught that it is you against the world? I was just listening to Tupac earlier. It's just me against the world, baby. Okay, it's not. Sorry, distracting. It's not. It's not you against the world. That is an incorrect teaching, and we'll get to that later. Not in this episode. We'll talk about that another time. But it is not you against the world. If it is you against the world and you're justifying that hostility and that I'm better than other people, why did Christ come for the whole world? You're making him out to be a confusing hypocrite. Worse than that, you're making his death invalid. Why would he die for the whole world if he didn't love the whole world? Right? And that's just one place of scripture that talks about his love for the world. God's love for the world, and more than that, his fierce protection and provision and sustaining of his creation is on every single page, Old Testament to New Testament, is dripping with the love of God for his creation. So you can't tell me otherwise. All right. So Christianity is being hostile to the world. There is I already read that. I don't think that this is going to be healed by better PR online. I think it can only be healed with true theology. Theology that tells us the truth about who we are before we ever speak about who Christ is to anyone else. That is my aim today. It's not to condemn the church that brought me in and took care of me at one time in my life when I myself was alone. It's not to condemn the church. I love her. Christ loves her. But the church isn't necessarily what people think either, right? The church is his sons and daughters. It's not an institution. It's not in a building. And you're walking around amidst the church who doesn't know it yet. Okay, anyways. Okay, my angels, we're going to get into the kind of meat of this episode, and that is to say we're going to define and explain what it means to be Sicut Deus, okay? And what is that even? Why are we getting that term? When, just to bring everybody up to speed, when the serpent offers Eve the apple, and he says, you should take a bite of this, he's saying the reason why she should do it. So the promise that he's making is that your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, right? So the connection there that the serpent is making is that if Eve does this thing, she will be like God. It's very, very simple in ancient Hebrew terms, right? There is a temptation and a promise that comes with that. So God has said, if you eat from the tree of good and evil, the knowledge of good and evil, I call it the tree of paradox. I don't know if that's other people's phrases or not, but that's what good and evil is. It's paradox. So if God has said, if you eat from that, first of all, you can exist without that, clearly, right? You can exist in paradise without that. But if you eat from that, you will die. Now, we know from the story that they don't die. So in the last episode, we talked about what does it mean to die? What is God explaining when he says, what is his definition of death? And for God, the definition of Adam's death would be that Adam is separated from God in sight, right? In his sight, in his knowing of God, in his knowing life the way that it was intended to be. We've also already discussed that Adam was making decisions. Even though it's very foreign to us in our state of reality now, in the middle, as we call it, it's very normal for us to be managing good and evil. That's our everyday, our morality, our ethics. It's just, it's everywhere. But we see in Genesis, Adam has lived, he's engaged with creation, he's named the animals, he's made decisions. He is totally functioning without knowing good and evil. So, and we've already distinguished as well, God has said, be fruitful and multiply. So it's not that God is holding back anything good from Adam, but God knows something about what the management of the knowledge of paradox entails. And it is not a human task. It is not something that we should even want. But we want it by default because we now understand ourselves as judges. And we can't imagine how vulnerable, how naive we would be without that judgy seat. We cannot imagine it. That's that false God within us. That is what Sicut Deus is. So we know that Adam and Eve do fall into this temptation. They take the bait, and we discussed that in the other episodes. Now, the next thing is that we know that immediately after eating the apple, Adam and Eve hide from God. Their immediate instinctual thinking has changed, and the author is showing us they have gone radically from being naked and unashamed to hiding and wanting to cover themselves after eating this apple, after knowing, suddenly being aware of the knowledge of good and evil, because the promise came with the bite. You are now like God. Now, the first reaction to that is the desire to hide. Okay. Now, why is that? Because there really was a shift of knowledge, right? Ontological, epistemological means how they exist and how they handle knowledge, information in their brains, radically, suddenly shifts. And the next second after this temptation, after taking the bait to have more and to be like God, is that they hide from God himself. Now, Bonhoeffer discusses this in terms of the conscience. The conscience that before, when we talk about your intuition is that part of you that can still hear God. It's still connected to God, right? Even after Adam is separated from God, he could still hear God. Remember, God says to him, "Where have you gone?" So he's right there letting us know that God has not moved. God is fixed in place. God hasn't changed. He is still seeing Adam, but Adam has moved, right? And Adam can no longer see God. So we see God's still there. He hasn't left him, right? And Adam can still hear God. So the intuition is the place that God, by his spirit, can still connect with his humanity. But the conscience, which is the place where we receive knowledge, right, which used to be innocent. The knowledge we received before was a very trust, honor-based. You're going to handle paradox. You're going to handle the really, really weighty. I'm splitting my brain over dynamics that are ethical dynamics that it's just that part I'm going to let you do. You give me the daily instructions and I'll use my discernment, my God and my intuition and I'll just make good decisions. And it doesn't mean that he's not aware of the temptation or the boundaries. He's just trusting God, right? Okay. So Bonhoeffer talks about the shift in his mind and our minds as we suddenly are aware of our conscience, okay? And our conscience is taking flight away from God. Why? Because we have become little false gods. We just said, yeah, okay, I'll be like God. In the last episode, I told you about how a lot of people think that the fall is like we're falling away from God, right? That's not what it was. It's the opposite. We fell in accusation against God, right? So everybody's come out of their boundaries and their consciences are now like God, aware of good and evil. If you are standing in front of God and you think you, whether you know it or not, are God, are you going to stand and face the God of the universe? Are you going to be able to stand and face your creator? No. The conscience hides in shame away from God. Sorry, my heater. Right? That is what shame is. It is the sudden awareness of our inner dividedness. That part of me knows I am your creature and I should be humble and I should have listened and I should trust and I should blah, blah, blah. It's a yielding to love, right? But then that other part of me, right, that old man, which we call, well, never mind. That other part of me is like, no, I am like you. I am like self. My God, I am God. I am God. I can decide. I can rule. I can manage good and evil. I can manage my own decisions. Thank you very much. And that separation, that independence is what we talk about. That they liberated themselves from paradise. They liberated themselves from belonging. They turned away from the gaze of God in doing that, and they could no longer see him. And to see him and to be aligned with him is to flow. It's like that hose, right? If we're not facing God, that hose just has a crimp in it. We're not getting knowledge the right way. Okay? It really truly is at the core center of humanity, who is all made in the image of God, that we only function properly when we are connected and trying to trust God, trying to be in alignment with God. That is when human beings work the best, because we are made in his image. Okay? Also, because what you look at, what you behold, you become. We're meant to look at God because we are little gods. We are sons of God. We are little him, his DNA, the way he thinks. We're little creators, right? And all of that, the promise that the serpent made was moot because we already had godlike status. We didn't need to strive for it, to be more for God. We didn't need to perform. We didn't need to stand up and do it independently of God. We had it with God. So the independence that we gained, okay, wait, hold on. So they run and they hide. God covers them. Beautiful. He covers them. The author is telling us, okay, when Adam and Eve walk out of the garden, make no mistake, they are walking out totally different creatures. They have gone from the state of imago Dei, made in the image of God, receiving their knowledge through God, through relationship, to Sicut Deus, being like God. They have to be God for themselves. What does it take to be God? What is the job description of God? You have to be omnipresent, omnipotent, or omnipotent, and you have to be omniscient. You have to be all-knowing, knowing good and evil, all-powerful, right? And all-present, which means also eternal. You cannot die and be God. We fear death now. We fear death, and it torments us because on one hand, the creature knows I was never supposed to die because God was sustaining me immortally, right? And yet now I feel like I have to stay alive and manage my life, right? And yet I know I'm going to die because my days have been limited now. It's our leading fear is death, right? You cannot not know everything and be God. It produces a constant need to calculate, label, compare, prove, and defend. Anybody or just me? Control. Number 2, over-functioning, micromanaging, unable to release outcomes, overthinking, analysis paralysis, inner debate, or mental spiraling. I'm just going to keep my hand up. Restless mind, can't settle, can't be present, can't turn off, shame, self-disgust, hiding, identity collapse, always feeling in a state of defensiveness, self-defense mode, reactivity, guardedness, and preemptively striking at people, right? I'm going to get them before they get me. I'm going to shut this down before they can shut it down. I'm going to control things before they can control it. Fear of death, fear of loss, I've already said that. Fear of endings, money anxiety, scarcity loops, even if you have enough, panic, budgeting, fear of lack. So what are the other requirements of God has to judge? Self-righteousness. That's the inner courtroom. A lot of people call this the inner critic. I like the idea of it being the inner courtroom because we are putting God on trial, right? But actually, we are the ones who are sitting in the defendant's chair. That's the real courtroom. Okay, a sense of contempt, just a general sense of contempt for the world and a general sense of moral superiority, which I've said to you before, that self-righteousness, Christianity today is 100% acting as though they are morally superior to the rest of the earth. True or not true? And celebrating it. Sicut Deus is when you feel responsible to produce or to resource what only God can provide people. God has to protect everyone, and God has to manage the eschatology of the earth. In other words, the outcomes of all things. All right? So they walk out of those gates feeling like they have to be there for themselves. They have to judge everything themselves. They have to protect everything themselves, and they have to manage every outcome. Does that sound slightly relevant to anyone? It's not just sin as you broke a rule. It is a nervous system, soul, spirit condition change entirely. It's self-sourced knowing, self-sourced covering, self-sourced control. It's a drift into fear-based responsibility, hypervigilance, the illusion of safety through certainty. You guys, how much does it make us afraid that we can't be certain? But we never actually rest in our certainty. Even when we think we can be certain, even when we think we've secured or locked it down, or we know we haven't. We know we haven't, because we are constantly also knowing that we're just creatures. So just as a quick recap, the tree of life, the original Imago Dei design was I receive life naturally through trust, union, and presence. The new paradigm for Adam and Eve and us is the tree of knowledge of good and evil, managing. I will secure myself and my existence through knowing, judging, and controlling. Okay? Okay, in kind of our modern colloquialism, how do you say that? If you resonate with any of these questions, this is maybe going to bring it home even more. Do you feel responsible for everything going right? Do you struggle to rest unless you have controlled all of the variables? Do you rehearse conversations and outcomes in mental loops? Do you feel a baseline sense of impending trouble? Do you default to self-criticism when anything goes wrong? Do you feel safer judging others than risking vulnerability? And do endings trigger panic because they feel like annihilation, not transition? Well, my angels, night has fallen upon us. It's getting dark. And I want to leave you with one final thought, because this is where reform either begins or fails. If I don't understand that the false God still lives within me, I will inevitably project it onto others. I will judge from a distance. I will legislate rather than love. I will dominate rather than serve. And I will call it faithfulness. This is why humility is not optional in the Christian life. It is not personality. It is not temperament. Humility is our true survival. Because the most dangerous thing in the world is not a sinner. It is a false god who believes that they are righteous. In the next episode, we're going to talk about Agnus Dei, the cure. And we're going to talk about why Christ doesn't come to educate the false god. We're going to talk about why Christianity didn't start as a philosophy like so many other religions, and why the requirements and the particular instructions Christ gives are the perfect antidote, and why they are the perfect death to the false god, because the false god is what has to be put to death. Because only then can innocence begin again. Okay, my angels, that's it for today. If you're enjoying these episodes, like and subscribe and whatever, all that stuff, okay? And if you want to, there's a donate button. I'm just here to create as many resources as possible. I'm really dedicated to this Reformation project and just freshening up what I truly believe is the good news. And yeah, so come and support and follow and all of that, share the videos, and I cannot wait till next time we're going to talk about Agnus Dei. I love you guys. Have a good night. Be kind to yourselves. Be gentle with yourselves and others around you. Okay. Bye, my angels.